You're like, save this. It's almost as natural as fucking mind.
I'm already hitting record because you're already going into the meat of the thing. So I'm like, great, let's go there.
Well, hopefully.
So yeah, let's rewind a little bit.
Antisocial behavior.
On this antisocial behavior and why you think us as humans actually don't like folks.
Us as humans. I don't even think it's us as humans, man. It's like
specific humans.
No, I think it's I think it's a very masculine reaction to. Okay, so what's one of our number one desires? Like one of the deepest needs that we have is to like quote unquote fit in, right? To be sociable.
Of course, because that's literally biologically we're meant to be part of communities and attachment to things and whatnot. People. I mean,
because evolution decided that the people that created those strong bonds. Well, that didn't decide. Like natural selection decided that, like for some reason, those are the people that are surviving, right? And everyone else that wanted to go off on their own, be antisocial, what have you, they ended up getting eaten or dying,
100%.
You know, or starving, whatever the fuck. So when we
to create cities, industrial life.
Well, yeah, that sort of eroded things, but anyway. So, what am I saying? One of our most fundamental desires is to fit in, because it enhances survivability.
Yeah.
But then I think at the same time we have a sort of a radar for people that don't fit in, and we isolate them, right? So like why, like you know, it was like classic like high school movie bullshit too, but the I think there's a real strong like biological. An evolutionary sort of like basis for why we exclude those people. You know, like there is something wrong that we maybe can't put words on it to detect, but there's something fundamentally wrong with them, and in identifying that sort of antisocial behavior, right? We then protect others around us from potential threats. So. I think like this came up in the context of fucking Oakland. We're talking about Oakland.
Sorry, this is where we currently live, but don't plan on living for a long time. So if you're from Oakland, I apologize in advance.
I'm not sorry about shit. So look, so there's a particular gentleman in Oakland. I'm not bullshit. He's not a gentleman. This guy is out of his mind crazy. He walks around with a cape. It's actually just a dirty, ugly blanket, but he pretends it's a cape. It seems, and he will be walking and mumbling to himself, and then start yelling and getting really aggressive, and then he just stops randomly in the sidewalk. So let's say you're walking towards him, right? You guys happen to be on the same side of the sidewalk. You're like, all right, how fast can I walk past this guy? Jesus. So like
this is a common occurrence in Oakland, by the way.
And you can ask anyone that lives in this area; they've all encountered this guy and had a similar experience where he will you know, let's say you're 10 steps away from each other. He'll stop and just stare down. You know, with his hood cloak thing over his head, and then he'll just stare at the ground, and you're like, is he about to like whip out a knife, or he's about to freak out on me? I don't know.
Right, you don't know.
You want to give him a big arc because you're like, this guy is clearly batshit fucking crazy, out of his mind crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I like to understand human nature through a lens of what were we doing, 5,000 years ago? Like, how would this have gone? 10,000 years ago. How would this have gone down? Let's say there's some guy in our tribe, right, that has developed that behavior.
He's going to get an arrow to the head.
An arrow to the head. We're going to probably, while everyone's sleeping, drag him outside the campfire, get a big rock, and crush his fucking skull in with it. Because why? There is something fundamentally wrong. We may not be able to put our finger on like, well, what about his behavior is really all that? What's wrong with that?
Right.
It's like, I can't really put my finger on it, but there's some very deep, primitive part of myself that says he's not supposed to be around my females. He's not supposed to be around my children.
Yep.
He's not supposed to be
100%.
around my family.
Yeah.
There's something dangerous about this, the way that he's behaving. And that antisocial behavior is not something that I should, embrace or oh, we should definitely encourage. Actually, let's just say, oh, it's okay. It's just mental diversity. It's neurodiversity. Yeah, he's just being his true self.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm not.
this is the problem with living in the weird cities. And I don't know if you read the 21st Century, the guide to 21st Century, like hunter gatherers. Do you have it?
I do.
You do.
Book. I haven't read it yet.
Okay. They have this whole idea of weird. I think weird stands for Western, industrial, educated, and I'm forgetting the R and the D. I can put it in the notes below. I know you got the book like literally right next to us. But I think like looking at that, it's just like, why do we not help? Like obviously this guy's been around. We both know him. I've been living here for over a year, and I still see him, and I'm like, well, why is he not getting the help that he's supposed to be getting? Right? Take him off the street. Psychologically evaluate this guy. And then put him through whatever necessary, what's it called? Like medication that he needs to be put on. Put him in some kind of facility, help him, but like keep him off the street. That's the point. Like, since we've been living here, I'm like, I definitely don't want to have kids here. I don't know how people in our building have babies, and I see them walking around in their carriages, and I'm like, I don't know. I think of things through a spiritual lens, and I'm like, what kind of energy is going into my child that's going to affect them in the future? I'm reading a book right now called The Myth of Normal, and he really discusses how specific mental states and like sicknesses, like autoimmune disease specifically, come from the fact that we are like our environment is really affecting us in so many ways than we think. Like we think it's like, oh, it's genetics, and it's like genetics plays such a small part. And Gabor Mate, the author, is like, that plays such a small part. Everything else is affecting children to turn into these, whether that's having unfortunate mental health side effects or even physical side effects from being in these places. Yeah. So like,
it's hard to quantify all that too.
Yeah.
Like, we don't really understand how the environment and the social climate that we're creating is actually going to like trickle down and affect our like future generations.
Right.
Like, I think the COVID moment is like a perfect example where we're like, wow, what's actually going to be the long-term effect of
locking us down for 2 years?
Yeah, like limiting social contact for babies and keeping children out of school, and like how is that going to trickle down and manifest in future generations? And this is just like a perfect example. But there's so many other like examples within society where we're like, we've set up these systems that allow people that, if we went back, like I said, like 10,000 years, they would not survive. Period. Full stop. They would not survive, right?
Yeah.
But now they're not just able to survive. I mean, they're able to reproduce. So it's like,
and thrive. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would,
I wouldn't say thrive. In their eyes, they're probably thriving because, like, I can live on this is talking about north, like even LA has this problem, and it's just like, I can live on the street in a tent, which I'm like, granted, maybe we lived like that once upon a time, but you have people, you have not only them being catered to, they have bathrooms, they have people bringing them food every day. I see the people, like when I run in the morning, I see them bringing food to the people like on the street, just living there. And I'm like, you're not solving the problem or the root cause of the problem. Like I worked in a nonprofit in New York City called NADAB, and shout out to NADAB because they were doing that in New York. Like, we take people off the street, right? We put them through whatever facilities they need to get through. Once they finish all their rehab and all those things, we help them go back into society and become, pay your taxes just like we do, right? And like get a job, pay your taxes, and we're going to help you. We're going to train you through workforce skill sets and teach you how to work with people through like the program. And it was like a few month long program. They will help them get jobs, and they support them in the first like 6 months while they're working that job.
I have so many questions. A question number one. There's okay. So I'll divide the question into two parts. One is mental health, and then the other part is about motivation. So starting with mental health, what do y'all do with the crazies? We know what we're talking about. When we say crazies, it's like
Yeah, well, there weren't really many of them. Most of the guys that came in were usually went to jail for, they usually went to jail for any kind of addiction, selling drugs, taking drugs. And, New York City, most drugs are illegal. It's not like here in California. And I have my own qualms about California making things legal because I think it's actually a detriment to more than it is a plus in many, many ways.
I'll argue that point with you later.
Yeah. But yeah, so like we would, my job during that time was an outreach specialist. I'll actually go to these centers and they would basically put me in a room with a bunch of the people who were like graduating. So they have been like clean for X amount of time. They're still taking their meds, but like, just making sure that they are ready to go back into the real world. And then from there, I would just tell them about the program, tell them to come into one of our information sessions, and then they would talk to one of our, I forgot what they were called, but they were like specialists, and they would do the training, they would set them up, they would pretty much be like a counselor for them. And, I met guys and ladies, all ages and groups, and we would just support them. Did we get a lot of like people with mental health? I don't think so. I think those people got sent to where they needed to be sent to, whatever that facility is. And yeah, so like a lot of those people didn't, because they had to work on a lot more things, or maybe they had something that was so detrimental that being in society may be really difficult for them.
Yeah.
And they have to live in a specific facility for sometimes the rest of their life. And I have family that live in facilities because they just, based on like physical disabilities, mental disabilities, there's nothing that, there's no like cure for that. You know what I mean? So they would be sent to those, and obviously those are all government paid.
Oh, you mean we pay that?
Oh yeah, taxes.
Sorry, it's not saying government paid. It's
taxes.
It's you and me. So, second question. The second part of the question. It seems like there's a fundamental level of motivation necessary.
Yeah.
By the person trying to reform and change their life and get back on their feet and get housed and get a job and pay their taxes. Like, there's a fundamental level of motivation that's necessary. Like, what is that true? And like, how can you give it like an example, like how true it was?
I don't know. I wasn't there long enough. I was only there for 8 months. So anyone that I've seen that went through it literally I only got to see maybe a few folks like graduate our program. I keep saying graduate, but they just finish and they get the job, and then the counselors just see them like once or twice a month, and they keep contact with them via, phone calls every week and things like that. And if for any reason they lose the job for, because these are folks that just don't understand EQ as well as a white collar worker would know, right? Like this fundamental understanding of like, I go to work and I'm not going to bring my whole self, right? Because I know that can get me in trouble. Unfortunately, that's just the way the work world is right now. And I think that folks are trying to change that, but like they wouldn't know how to like talk to people. So they would do something wrong and the people would be like, fuck this, and they let them go. So they end up back in our program because then they need a new job, and then we would help them get a new job and, give them feedback. This is how you handle that situation, things like that. And usually the people that came to the program is because they wanted to. It was optional. Like we wouldn't force them into it. So they wanted to change. Maybe they have been in this situation for so long and they're just tired of the constant like, well, this is the cycle I'm living in, and they have an idea of what they need to do next. So there was already intrinsic motivation for them, and then we would provide like a space for them to follow that motivation and pretty much give them that inspiration. Most of those guys actually become maintenance workers. So if you look at a maintenance worker in New York City, they probably came through one of our programs, because we're not that program I worked in was not the only one, obviously. There were many. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of those maintenance workers, folks that are, fixing things in a building, things like that, they come from those programs usually, not all the time.
Interesting. So don't look at a maintenance guy too long dead in the eyes. He might, take that wrench and do something else with it. I see. Got it. 10-4. Very, very interesting. Because, again, I think, we were just talking about antisocial behavior and not being able to like fit into a group or rejecting the group identity for like, you know, yours being so much more important. That's antisocial behavior. It's not surprising to hear that, you know, those people get negative results, even in society, right?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So maybe there's more elements to that idea. I think that could be fleshed out more. But I digress. We were talking about the legalization situation in California.
Yeah.
I think this is one area where, you know, I think there's a level of acknowledgement that we need, and it may not exist quite yet in the East Coast, because especially in the Northeast corridor, it's like a lot of a lot of old school sort of thinking there still.
Yep.
But the war on drugs failed. Not just failed.
1,000%.
It's failed so miserably that it's like
it made things much worse.
And not just that it made things worse. I mean, there's like we have this immigration crisis, and the conservatives that want to complain, well, there's too many immigrants coming over the border. It's like, well, why do you think they're coming over the border, right? Like, what do you think they're coming to America for? Because their homes are unsafe. They would rather be a field worker in the middle of Idaho.
Yep.
You know,
they can, like,
living in a trailer,
be far away from them,
where they don't need to worry about some random group of people riding down on them with guns and deciding that, oh, their son is a danger to the cartel, so he needs to go. Yep. It's like, what? It's, you know, so like it's when you the war on drugs, I feel like not just emboldened, it's fueled a lot of the chaos that happens in South America.
Yep.
You know, and some of these societies that have just, you know, started to really be feeling the detrimental impact of the war of the war on drugs and how powerful these cartels are.
Oh man, ridiculously powerful. So
pre-COVID times, there is a crazy story where the Sinaloa cartel, one of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, I think is it's El Chapo's son. I think El Chapo was the old leader of the Sinaloa cartel.
Okay.
And one of El Chapo's sons, who was like kind of like the acting head, was arrested by the Mexican government. Right.
That's a mistake.
In the heart of the cartel's territory, and there was supposed to be an in and out operation. They were just supposed to get in, arrest him, get out. Right. Mm-hmm. But it didn't quite go that way. So what ended up happening is that once the message got out, the cartel took to the street with military level force. It was, you know, there's this crazy video of this one cartel sniper that had a Barrett 50 cal sniper rifle, and he was firing at the police with this sniper rifle. They were rolling around with 50 caliber machine guns on the back of trucks. Like, this is like military level.
How do they get all this?
Oh, well, I mean, that's an interesting question too. But shit got real when they surrounded the local police officers' families' living quarters, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And they took the building under their control. And they had pretty much a hostage situation going on. Where they're like, yeah, some bad things are going to come and happen to a whole bunch of people unless our leaders returned. What did the Mexican government do?
They still arrested him and let this...
Oh, no. They returned his ass. That's what they did.
Damn.
And it was the first... not the first time, but it was a very clear signal that, no, the government of Mexico, no, you are not more powerful than the cartel. And you can come in here and you can try us. Because we'll respond in equal force. They're probably hiding tanks somewhere, too.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
Probably a tank or two, you know, just in case. Anyway, I think the war on drugs failed miserably. Getting back to the point, talking about the war on drugs. In California has taken probably a bit of a too extreme, a little bit too. I'd say their approach is probably a bit too quote unquote progressive.
I think so too.
But I think that the spirit behind it is the right spirit. I think
the right spirit.
The right spirit, yes. You can end the war on drugs by legalizing drugs in America.
Yeah.
Make the government the one that controls and distributes and has a fair price on the drugs, and watch all the power, not all the power potentially, but a lot of the power of these cartels that are just driving so much disruption and chaos start to wane and crumble.
Right.
Because, well, Americans no longer need to go and, we don't, drug dealers in America no longer need to source their drugs from, South America or cook them themselves. It's like all government regulated. And you just go to your local dispensary and get, whatever hell you want.
Right.
Kill yourself on your own terms. So it's like,
kill yourself or make yourself go crazy on your own terms.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're not hurting anybody else or exhibiting too much antisocial behavior in my little neck of the woods, that's fine. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, because obviously, we live in Oakland, which had, literally, not too long ago, I was able to go to a regular store and buy mushrooms, no problem. The problem with that, I think, and why I said that earlier, was because there's even weed, I feel like certain strains of weed can be very, very powerful, in the sense that if you don't understand it or understand this plant or how to use it, it can be detrimental to your mental state. And if you don't understand about how, integration or talking to a professional about it, it could be very, very detrimental. And if you don't know, it could make you schizophrenic. This has happened. And Tim Ferriss, on his podcast, he talks a lot about this, because he's currently very, very deep into this, psychedelic work. And we're legalizing these drugs more and more because they're helping a lot of our military with PTSD and things like that. Major depression, these drugs are really helping. And why I said I think California, like you said, has taken too much of a liberal approach. Is let's just make it legal and you just figure it out yourself. And it's well, that's not a good idea, because if you don't know too much about it and you don't know how to use it correctly, you can have a bad experience, and that bad experience can turn you into, someone with mental health challenges that were never there before. And this is something that isn't talked about a lot. And people are yeah, I'm going to smoke all this weed. They get addicted to weed, and I'm not a fan of weed, because I'm well, I think it brings more people back than it does forward. Does that make sense?
It does. It's a perspective. I definitely can see parts of it. I mean, for me personally, I think that there would be more murders, more suicides, and a lot more detrimental effect to making weed too hard to get.
Right.
Than positive effect. With full transparency, of course, obviously, there's not full transparency, but just recognizing the fact that marijuana can exacerbate certain mental health disorders.
Right.
Something that could be lying there in wait, just sort of gosh, you're right on the edge of being, bipolar, but you're not,
right.
Well, or let's say you're bipolar type 2, and, all of a sudden you do the wrong, eat the wrong mushrooms, smoke the wrong strain, and then you're type 1 bipolar and, off the rails. So I hear that, but I do think that the promise of some of these, if we give people enough support and structure to really leverage these drugs in ways that help them instead of hurt them, I think there's a lot of potential there. There's a stereotype of the black inner city youth / male drug dealer, what have you, always smoking marijuana. Snoop Dogg is the archetypical. Snoop Dogg, Jesus Christ. It's how can you just stay high? How can you stay high all the time? Anyway, the stereotype is rooted in a very unfortunate reality that a lot of these men live high stress lives and exist in high stress environments. When I say high stress, they are constantly in a state where their cortisol levels are high.
Yep.
And I could be in a life or death situation almost any time. There's threats all around me.
Right.
Right. That can absolutely destroy your mental health, and then your physical health too, and it does. So I have a deep well of empathy for the person that feels like, oh well, this is how I maintain, this is how I keep sane,
right?
Like this is how I keep from murdering people, and hell, the guy I killed the last week, well, hell, because I didn't smoke my daily blunt, so. Pick your poison here,
when it comes to like rappers, I'm like, sometimes I think that's exactly what's happening, and they just never get caught.
And of course, I should clarify. No, I did not kill anyone last week. I'm just speaking very sarcastically and making the example. I know you people get all crazy and shit.
Yeah.
God. But yeah. So that's sort of my stance. I agree. We need more structure around it, though. There's
100%.
not a lot. I'm really encouraged by what's happening with research into the potential benefits of psilocybin for not just PTSD, as you mentioned, but for a whole wide range of mental health disorders. So I'll tell us a personal story.
Personal psychedelic mushroom story.
I was at one point in my life obsessive compulsive to a point it was negative to my career. It was negative to my relationships, and it kept me from really growing as a person, right? Mm. So I had learned over the years how to try to dial it down, how to talk to myself, Daniel, it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. It's okay. Right. But there are times, for example, I don't know, walking out of the house without my bed made. To the T.
Yeah.
To the T.
That would really affect you.
It would be debilitating to the point I'd try to be focusing at work and I couldn't focus at work. I'd be out on a date and I wouldn't be present on the date. I needed to execute everything that I knew that I needed to do in my life, have everything in its right place, and only after then was I able to relax, because in the back of my head I know I had this strong foundation of all this stuff is taken care of. I'm not thinking about it. It's if you want to call that coping, then sure. We'll call it coping.
Where did that come from, though?
I think a lack of control over my over the environment that I was raised in. I think that's a big part. I think there's a level of disgust that came in too, because my mother and her husband were never very clean and orderly people. So I think due to the chaos of some of the situations that I experienced when I was growing up, I think I overcorrected towards order, found some sort of safety in that, and then it just sort of continued to spiral out of control, and had a lot of anxiety and a lot of other stuff that was going on, what have you. Back to mushrooms. So I did my first psilocybin. I had my first psilocybin experience.
I like how you say it. Psilocybin.
Is psilocybin?
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, right? I don't know. I'm not judging, man. I'm just correcting.
Psilocybin? Sure. We'll roll with it. Mushrooms. And, I had an experience where, it wasn't it wasn't a huge trip. It was my first time ever tripping.
You did it by yourself, right?
Yeah, it was by myself.
You're a wild man over here.
And and I had a close friend who was very experienced, come and check in on me, sort of very late in the trip, and as I was coming down, and help me sort of
integrate.
I guess we've talked about that before. I don't know. I don't know all the specifics, but anyway, that particular trip afterwards, in the months afterwards, my obsessive compulsive behavior waned heavily. To the point I was like, why doesn't this stuff bother me anymore? I don't feel a compulsive desire to do X or Y or make sure this is like this, or I felt like I was almost like a free man. I felt like I chains fell off of my own mind, and I was able to live life in a way that I was like, wow, this is actually really powerful. I had no expectation, no idea that's what the effect could be, but I mean, for me, that was one of the benefits of that experience. It wasn't just that; it was also I felt like a whole bunch of neural pathways in my brain got rewired, right? Or maybe I was able to zoom out from behaviors and habits that I had that were not actually useful to me, and ask myself the fundamental question, like, well, why? And why do I do that?
Right.
You know, I think it's one of the most powerful things about a shrooms experience with mushrooms, and that's the new perspective that you have in your life afterwards. On something as simple as like, why is my couch there? You know, or maybe why am I doing this job? Or why don't I have a relationship with that family member? What's the problem? Really, what's the problem? You know?
The perspective that you felt like it gave you a lot of.
A lot of it. A whole bunch of old ideas became obsolete.
Was there anything particular about the experience that really like, that you remembered that you can tie back to like why you were able to like see yourself as like, oh, I have this new perspective because I had this experience during the trip?
I never have had a truly psychedelic experience on mushrooms.
Interesting.
Not like a lot of people that say, I saw colors and the wall started talking to me, then the refrigerator started. It's like, oh my gosh, dude! It's like I've never had that.
So it was like a deep meditation for you.
Oh, not even that. It's actually like I go through a lot of the same phases where usually when I start tripping, my first phase is like a dance phase where I just feel like I want to move, and I just turn on my favorite music and I have an uncontrollable desire to dance. I don't understand it, but that's just how I roll. And then, of course, I usually start to get tired. I fall down onto some soft surface, and then I sink into it. I fall into the pit of my own shit.
Yeah.
Right? My inner shit. And, you know, that can be really hard to come out on the other side of that for some reason. Like, after the tears dry, I'm like, okay, I guess it ain't that bad. You know? I'm going to climb out on the other side, and I start to calm down, and then I just, like, have this peaceful focus. I want to do things. I want to be productive. I want to, like, fix something. I want to write something. I want to do something. And then as I come out on the other side, then I realize, oh my God, I haven't eaten in the last 8 hours. I'll eat. But it's in the weeks following.
Yeah, that's when a lot of the work,
all the stuff starts to come up, and I'm like, wait a second, like, why does this feel so bizarre? Or like, why don't I remember? Or what was I thinking? Why is it this way? Why was that the plan? Like, all these things all these questions start to bubble into my mind, and you know, yeah, I think that's the most powerful part of trips to me. I'm gonna, next time I do shrooms, I will do a heroic dose. I'm trying to get myself to that point.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm like, where I want to see the walls melt. You know what I mean? But you know, I probably won't have that happen based on my experience.
Yeah. Dang, man. So, and it's very recent for you doing the psychedelic trips, right? Like, and you've only done a max of like 2 milligrams.
Oh God, it's like 3.5 for like
3.5
for my last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the one before that was like 2 grams. Those were like very, very fresh mushrooms. So it was, you know.
You never. I mean, it doesn't. I feel like it doesn't matter like how many you take. It just like does its thing.
Yeah.
Like you take it and it's just like, this is what you need right now, so I'm gonna give you that. You know, like whatever that is. And and I guess since you've done that, like what's been probably the biggest shift for you in like, you know, your life? I mean, you started to talk about like the OCD started to kind of chill out, but like anything that had impact on like your life.
Yeah, like relative to the OCD, like you know, it's that the OCD thing, while it's impactful, is like almost surface level relative to my perspective on my relationships. Mm-hmm. So I grew up with a father that was not my biological father, but he had his name on my birth certificate, and I suspect, he knew very much that I was not his kid. He was early on convinced that I was his kid.
Oh wow!
I was not, and I think probably by the time I was like 3 or 4, he had it clear in his head. He's like, no, this ain't mine. I got tricked. And I had a mother who was very, very aloof. You know, like I'm like, when I say aloof, I'll use the word abandoned very, very tactically in that. While I was never wanting for food, I was left to my own devices for the most part. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of hard stuff that came out on the other side of that. I think the most quantitative example of that I can give is that there's a box in my mother's home of old report cards and midterms where I was struggling in the same subjects since roughly like the third grade.
Wow.
And I say struggling, I mean like D's to failing. And that box is full of signatures on those report cards. Because I had to turn in the signatures. So they clearly saw the issue, and it's not like the trend changed between when I was young to when I was older. But for whatever reason, my mom had her own things that she was dealing with.
Of course.
And what the hell does her husband give a shit about like my education? It's like, come on, like this is my kid. I have a daughter that's my biological kid. I'm gonna make sure that she's good. So I say all of that to say like I had a lot of resentment towards my mom because as I grew older, I realized how detrimental and how far back that left me in my life and like sort of where I would what my outcomes would be.
Yeah.
Like my very first job should have been at I should have my first internship should have been at Google. My first instead of working in an Apple store, I should have been able to be a mechanical engineer at Apple corporate, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I just want to screw bolts into the bottom of computers, but it give me the opportunity. And I didn't believe at the time that I was intelligent enough to do anything more than work in a fucking grocery store.
Wow.
So that to me was, those experiences set me back a lot. And it wasn't until, I really started to come into my own and hustle in my career and learn new things and start to come to the conclusion wait a second, I'm not dumb. In fact,
great.
I'm actually pretty
smart. Yeah, I'm great realization.
Yeah, it's that's confusing because I was always under the impression that I was stupid. I was one of the slow kids. When in fact, my very first job was in an Apple store, and I was considered the foremost expert in the store on literally anything Apple related. Wow. Absolutely anything. So people used to come to me to ask me the question that they would then come to their customer to actually answer the question. Or a genius from the Genius Bar would come and say hey, Daniel, I'm super strapped on time. Can you help this person do X, Y, and Z? And I was conscientious enough, had the personality enough, knew what I was doing well enough where people would entrust me with an incredible amount of responsibility over people's personal technology. We're talking about people's data. You know what I mean? This isn't that's sometimes people's whole lives are on these computers. Whether it's in the form of photos or writings or etc. So, it was a lot of responsibility, but I was, for some reason intelligent enough to not just do that job but be the best person in my Apple store, 115 person Apple store at this job. So I'm oh, that's interesting. And they can quantify that with my sales numbers and quantify that with my NPS scores, net promoter scores, customer satisfaction rating, right? So after an interaction, a sample of customers get sent a survey. How was your experience in the store? And the number of glowing reviews that I got was there's literally one other person in the Apple store that would ever get to my level. And me and her were just neck and neck. It'd be me number one or her number one, then it'd be me number one again. So anyway, I digress. Why the hell does this matter with respect to mushrooms? Let's bring it back. The resentment that I had for my mother grew as I grew into the knowledge that I'm actually proficient. Not only am I proficient, I had a ton of potential that was completely untapped.
Right.
So as I started progressing in my career, I found product management. I started making more money than I ever thought was ever going to be possible in my lifetime. Oh my God! I used to fantasize about making $100,000 a year.
Right.
That would be my.
Same.
That was a fantasy. When I say fantasy, it's like there's no way. It's never going to happen. It will never happen. But that's the bar. And if I could do it one day, right? The amount of resentment for my mother, especially on the rediscovery of these old report cards a couple of years ago, was like voracious. It was. I could honestly say, and I'm still working on my relationship with my mom. We're much, much, much better than we were, thanks to mushrooms. I'll get to that in a second. But I was absolutely, I would say I was. Hatred is a word that I could use to describe my feeling towards my mother and her husband. Like I do not understand when people are like, oh yeah, my mom did crack, but I love my moms though. It's like I don't get that. I don't understand that at all. You know,
the whole idea of like, but she's my mom, so I have to, you know.
Yeah, but she's my mom, but she didn't do jack shit for me.
Right.
So, I didn't die growing up. Thanks, you did the. Wow,
you
checked that box. Okay, so you didn't get hauled out by the police. Awesome, great. Child Protective Services didn't come and take me away. That's really wonderful. Oh man. So how the hell do I jive? You know this. This negative feeling towards my mother. The fact that I had to do all this stuff in my life, my own self. Like how do I come to terms with that? And like look my mother dead in the face and be like, you know, I care about you. I care about how do I have a conversation with you? Because my entire life, I've worked to overcome the shitty position that you started me in.
Right.
That's all I've been doing. And that's literally like, you know, what I've spent. I spent the vast majority of the energy in my 20s doing, putting myself in a better position. So after that mushroom trip was the first time I was able to feel empathy for my mother. I was able. This is inexplicable. Maybe it's like the hateful thought pattern that I would just go down. Right? Like I would think, Mom, these are the thoughts that are associated with that. Right?
Yep.
The mushrooms. I don't know. I can't explain exactly what happened, but there was some sort of disassociation between that thought pattern and then the relationship that has to my mother.
Right.
Where I'm like, I can acknowledge all those feelings, and I think those feelings are like mostly justified. That's fine, right? But where is that leaving me in the end? A, and then B, are you really truly understanding this, like what your mother really went through? Like, why do you think? Why was it that she was so aloof?
Right.
Okay, well, holy shit! Now I have a new mushrooms. Put me on a new mission, a new path. To like, oh shit! Like,
deep sense of compassion, right?
How about I understand where my mom came from, and how the events leading up to my conception, and then later on in life, you know, made her make the decisions that she made. So, yeah, man, that's I think that was one of those powerful things that mushrooms did for me, because it was such a burden in my heart. Like it's something I thought about every single day. Like it's like you know, God, like especially when you start to become successful in light of being set up for failure. Right. It's like, wow, you know, it's great that I'm here, but fuck everyone that did not help me get here. You know, that could have.
Do you feel like that hate, or like, I mean, we can say hate or like whatever word you want to implement for that negative, like, do you feel like that gave you the energy to pursue, you know, all the things that you able, and like to add to that is like, were there any mentors, or even if it's internet mentors, or anyone that really gave you perspective and got you to shift from being like, I'm never going to make 100K to like, I'm going to eventually hit that? Obviously your relationship with your mom is separate from this because that was part of a mushroom experience. But I think like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like for us to reach a level from being like, I'm in the negative, right? There's so many people that have some sense of like, you know, that both their parents do a decent job. They have a house, they have cars, you know, they have all the basic needs met. Like we came from places that are like, well, we're behind that. We don't even have the basic needs met, and the basic needs can be taken away at any given time. But yeah, so like you were able to fulfill the basic needs, you know, like having food on the table, water, air to breathe, a place to live, shelter, sex, all these things that we need. And you were able to think about like, oh, now I can think about this relationship with my mother and like all these other factors because, you know, there's some sense of privilege if you have like your survival needs met, you're able to finally think through those things versus someone who's not, which is a lot of your childhood. So like, what gave you that energy to like do that? Who helped you along the way? Even if you don't have a relationship with them, you have a relationship with them through a screen maybe. And I talk about like internet mentors like have helped me a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely want to dig into that.
Wow, that's, you know, it's something I've thought about over time. There was no one, and I'm not being facetious saying this. Like, there were no mentors around me, and no one that set me on this path. I could say that I had a very militant mentality, and perhaps this is where my some of my obsessive compulsive behavior like benefited me. That same energy that animated me to like be obsessive compulsive is actually part and parcel to like who I am fundamentally. So, like for example, the first time I remember sort of coming into consciousness that I was like a sentient being. It was like the first time I was like, oh wow, I exist. You know, like I wasn't just like living like a monkey anymore. I was like, oh holy shit, like
I'm a conscious being.
Like I'm like, this is all happening right now. I'm here. Okay, it's really abstract to think about, but you know, I was like 12 years old. I very clearly remember a day where I was like looking at my bedroom. Thank God I had a bedroom. You know, I was given that. That's great. And I had toys. Very fortunate to have things to play with, and they were everywhere, all over the floor. My room was the best. I used to make paths through the room, between paths in the room, to like walk around between like, you know, all these piles of clothes and toys. And I looked around and I was like, why the hell is it like this? How can it be better? Like, I don't like this anymore. Actually, I don't even play with all these toys. They're just here. So I gathered up all the toys I didn't play with, stuck them in some like box downstairs in the basement. Clean my room. I love the feeling of the clean, spotless floor. I'm 12 years old, and I'm looking at my room like, this feels good.
This is some spiritual shit. Just smack you in the face or something. Damn.
I'm like, and ever since then, it's been like sort of the same thing. And I've, you know, been, and this is probably a weakness of mine. I've never been able to find like truly strong mentors in my life. It's never something that's come easily. I don't have a strong relationship with my, I at least, especially growing up, I did not have a strong relationship with my mother's extended family. Those are the people around me. I didn't have a good relationship with my mother's husband. I wasn't on any sports teams. The people I spent the most time with are kids that I played video games with, and literally all we would do is play video games together. Right. So I had a lot of time in my own head, but I built this grit through video games, which is really strange. That I'm the sort of gamer where I will keep on trying and keep on playing. It doesn't matter how bad the odds are. I'll keep on going no matter what. Like, right. I don't stop. Like, stopping is.
How do you know that was not the difference between like your grit or like the addiction that video games keep pulling you back because of?
No, never was addicted to video games.
Okay.
Never. I never fell into that that trap. To me, it was something that I truly enjoyed doing. I felt good at it. That was the other thing. Like, there's so many things in life I just felt like... Man,
there's something about feeling good at, like, being good at something and feeling like you're good at something that keeps you coming back for more. You know? It's very... that's the true dopamine that we should be experiencing, not junk dopamine, like scrolling through TikTok.
I 100% agree. So, yeah, I was just a weird kid, man. I was a weird, bizarre kid. I was able to motivate myself to like execute and like do a lot of these things that purely through self-motivation. Like, I see a problem, and this is the trend that I've had in my life. I see something about my life I don't like.
Right.
Why? Why don't I like it? Well, I don't. What about it could be better? Let's say I'm a 12-year-old kid and looking at my bedroom. Well, I could be able to walk around my room. Okay, let's do that. Let's clean it up. That felt good. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Did that translate into school at the time or no?
No, but not until my sophomore year of
high school.
Yeah, it was like my sophomore junior year where I finally came into consciousness. Like, wait a second, like I want this to be better too. Like, you know, and started improving my grades, and, you know, started to like really try to motivate, like pushing myself to climb out of like wherever I was. So yeah, there were no mentors. There's really just this attitude of like conscientiousness and this almost militant mentality that I had towards life in general. Like when I say I did not give up, giving up was not an option on the table. And I used to play video games with these guys that were like, you know, some of them are absolute savages. Like we played Halo 2, we played Gears of War.
I was just gonna ask what you were playing.
Yeah. That was like, you know, those were the games at the time.
Xbox, man.
Very much Xbox. And I'll tell you something, man. I used to play with guys that were just like, you know, we do jiu-jitsu together, and I get dominated in jiu-jitsu all the time because I'm still new. I am used to that. I'm used to that. I'm used to being in a position where like I'm the underdog, or I'm like the one that, you know, like I'm like, compared to other people, I'm really, really good compared to other people. But in my circle, right? Yeah, maybe I'm third.
Pure shit.
You know what I mean? Because there's always that guy that's like faster, stronger. Some part of his brain is just wired to just be good at whatever it is that he's doing.
Right.
And I'm like, you know, that's more power to those guys. But then I hit the bricks with everyone else, and I'm like, yeah, y'all ain't shit. Like, relatively speaking, you know, like when it comes to other things in life, I apply that same grit, you know. And with you, I call that going Super Saiyan, because I see that in you sometimes. You go, you know, you just like
turn something on.
You hit the switch, boop. It's like, yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? It's like, wow. Like I've seen that before. I see that myself. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I can't say that I'm like that militant anymore. I think I've calmed down a lot. Like I've achieved so much that I never dreamed that I'd achieve, you know, and I'm in one of the best places in my life I've ever been in. But, you know, it's all been through this process of like self-motivating to like change my outcomes for the better. If I see something I don't like, whether that's my salary, whether that's my body, whether that's my confidence, whether that's my, you know, my relationships, whether that's like how hot the woman I am, I'm with this, like, I want to fix it. How do I make it better? Like, how do I improve that? Like, how do I improve my outcomes? You know, so
I feel like that's a healthy, masculine way of looking at things. You know what I mean? Like, there's a sense of like guys right now that play the sense of victim, because like being a victim right now is so, you get showered. It's in, right? Like you become a victim, and for some reason you get a lot of accolades for that, versus someone who can take something and say like, this is bad, I'm going to work on making this better for myself, and in turn, doing that for myself makes other people's lives better, whether that's at work, with your family, in your relationships. There's something about that, and I think that's very much missing in the fabric. Like you able to have this perspective around it. Jesus Christ, you have so many messages. You want to check those? No. Just picks up his phone, makes a face. Like, oh shit. It's all the ladies you have in it. No, I'm kidding.
Oh man, they don't say it on the podcast. They don't need to know about that.
They
may listen to this shit.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, who? What's her name?
What's her name? I need to know her name. But I think that's beautiful. But at the same time, I think that there's something about us as men that we have to always be looking to make better. Like there's something about being a healthy man that's like, I need to make this better. I need to turn this into something beautiful. And I, you know, biologically, it's testosterone, right? Really driving us to have the drive and like build and create and all these things. And I think on a spiritual level, there's just some, like when we are connected to that part, or like that, you know, Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art, calls it the muse. When we're connected to that, we're able to even give so much more and like, you know, make other people's lives better. Because obviously there's a selfish side, which is like the dark part of masculinity. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity, so I'm not going to use that word. But there is dark sides to it. And then there's that side that you're able to move into, which it shows, right? You've been able to do that. I mean, with the work you do now and all the other things you've accomplished.
Yeah, that's in product management, we call those trade-offs, right? There's always a trade-off. Always trade-off.
Always a trade-off.
And that's that's really where you come in as a product manager to help teams make those trade-off decisions in a way that's going to be beneficial to the company, the users, and sort of drive towards a higher level goal. So when it comes to masculinity, I think there's trade-offs, right? Same thing.
Yeah.
So you can go tilt too far in any which direction, and too much of anything it's
detrimental.
Yeah, definitely going to be bad. But when it comes to what were you just talking about? Masculinity. But what about it?
You said you were going to go into like the there's too much of anything is bad. So like,
yeah.
And I was saying like how we're moving. There's a nice side which you've done. The muse, yeah.
The muse. Okay, getting back to this. So
getting back on track.
So there's two sides. There's trade-offs, always trade-offs. I do agree with you that something very fundamental to man, the masculine, right?
Right.
Is looking at their environment and finding ways to make it better, to change the outcomes of their tribe, of themselves. Imagine the guy that figured out how to make the first like javelin. Well, maybe not javelin. The first bow and arrow. Let's use the bow and arrow as a great example. All of a sudden he's able to change the outcomes for his family, where he's able to hunt in a way that no one's ever hunted before.
Right.
Where he can take birds out of the sky. Like he can shoot these arrows at other humans.
For protection.
Yeah. So he's like, oh my gosh, like this is so powerful. How the hell did he figure that out?
It's a good question.
He was probably sitting there staring at these damn squirrels and stuff. He's like, I'm tired of trying to throw a spear at a squirrel, or I'm tired of trying to throw a rock at it to stun it so I can hop on top of it and rip it, like break its neck. It's like, what am I like? How am I going to do this? What
the easier way to do?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I know I could throw a spear, but what if there's some way to throw like a mini spear? You know what I mean? Well, that doesn't really work very well. I made a mini spear. It sucks. It doesn't have enough weight. Okay, well, what if I found a way that I can like propel it forward? I don't know. Sometimes we have those slingshots, right? Yeah. Wonder if we could do something similar with.
And just all these connections.
Yeah, you sit around long enough, and then you'll get a bow and arrow. You sit along a little bit longer, then you're gonna get metallurgy. You'll get bronze, melted bronze and bronze weaponry, bronze weapons, and then all of a sudden we're getting iron. Like wow, we found new ways. We keep innovating and finding ways to improve our environments. I think that's very, very fundamentally masculine. I do think that the extreme end of that. If you're let's say we're all early humans, we're sitting in the cave around the campfire, and there's that guy that is so obsessed with trying to melt this rock down into something. And he's so obsessed with trying to melt this rock and get the furnace to be hot enough, right? This crazy furnace thing that he built, that he's like, dude, you're not bringing any meat to the campfire anymore. Like, you're not bringing any meat at all. Actually, all the females think that you're crazy, and actually, you're exhibiting some antisocial behavior.
Going back to our original point when we started.
We're about to drag you outside this campfire, bro, and beat your head to one of these rocks you try to melt. So how do you got to maintain this balance between like impact and what's valuable, right? And this sort of this creativity and the creation of something new. Like I would rather let's say I'm not able to melt iron, but I'm able to melt bronze or copper, whatever the hell. But at the same time, I'm able to do that and provide for my family group. I'm able to be a good hunter. In fact, I'm able to leverage the skills that this sort of side project that I'm doing to help improve my outcomes in hunting, so I can then continue to feed my family. I can feed my family even more effectively. Like that's the balance to strike. Because if you go too far to the other end, which our society allows for now, which is like great, in its own way. I just think I don't think that's positive. I don't think that's where the masculine is. I don't think that's where men are supposed to be. And that's if we tell like fast forward into like modern society. Those are the nerdy software engineer that has no social skills.
Right.
All he knows how to do is code.
Right now.
He codes. He makes a ton of money.
Ton of money.
But what the fuck does he know about life? He has no street smarts. He has no like. He might be intelligent, but he hasn't really found a way to like deploy that in like society in a way that's actually like helpful, balanced. And hell, maybe the best that he'll be able to do for a woman is another software engineer that sort of just like gets how he thinks and accepts his lack of these fundamental masculine characteristics that I would say the alpha female is looking for, right? That she's like, that's actually I could leave it at that. So, I think there's balance there. I think there's a balance that needs to be struck. Hyper specialization is always dangerous.
I obviously the podcast is called the Pondering podcast, and I told you earlier when we were doing some jiu-jitsu, like what is something that's been really, really like top of mind for you outside of what we've spoken about so far? That's just been like nagging at you. You haven't kind of gotten an answer to it, but you've been pondering it.
Oh man, so the thing that comes top of mind, there's a couple of things. One is how cowardice is influencing society today. Cowardice. Example. I'm not going to name any names. There's a new guy in the jiu-jitsu gym, and he was his sixth class or something like that. Started rolling, and he would tap mid-roll from being exhausted or tired.
Wait, really?
Really.
That's interesting.
Or I'd get him into something that was like barely a hole. I'm just putting pressure or applying pressure. Tap. I'm like, bro, you ain't built for this. Like you ain't got the juice.
What are you scared of?
What hell? Why are you? I mean, excuse me. This may be offensive to some people. Why are you being such a bitch? Like why? Like what? That is not what our society needs right now.
No.
We do not need men that will stand in a hallway with guns while they hear gunshots going off in a fucking classroom and kids dying. That is not what we need as a society right now. We don't need men that are so over-concerned with their position and their power that they are willing to sacrifice their fundamental moral ideals to maintain their power. Conservatives, senators, like there's
any political.
It's actually not even. It's not even conservative. It's just
political.
Anyone that's in the realm of politics, conservative, liberal, middle of the aisle, anyone that's not willing to actually like put their foot down and say like, actually, I believe in this so fundamentally, right? I'm not willing to sacrifice my ideals. What's her name? She's the daughter of Cheney's daughter.
I don't know.
Dick Cheney's daughter. What's her name?
I'm not in the political world like that. Let's Google it. So I don't have a Jamie.
I'm embarrassed that I don't remember her first name. Oh, Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is her name.
Okay.
So Liz Cheney is a conservative.
Okay.
That is executing. Oh, she was before she was voted out of office, unfortunately. That was leading the investigation into the January 6th.
Oh yes.
Riots.
Riots. In the White
riots
House,
/ uprising / whatever the hell you want to call it. That day that was like an absolute blight on our democracy, and she was a conservative that knew that her base, where she's coming from, a lot of her base were Trump supporters.
Yep.
She's probably trying. A lot of her like people from her base that were like, people that voted for her that ended up showing up on that day and doing shit that they shouldn't have done. So she, with all the death threats, all the political pressure, right, decided to stand by her ideals and her love for this country and run that investigation anyway, right?
Right.
I'm using the wrong terminology here. I should be closer to it. But that is what we need more of. We need courage as a society.
Oh, 100%.
And you know, part of the reason why I love jiu-jitsu is because like it taps into my courage every single time I'm like stepping through the doors. You know, I bow at the entryway to the gym. It's like there it is. You know, I like this.
I'm gonna roll with that new guy. I don't know what belt level he's in, but I'm gonna be like, you want to go? Like, that's kind of scary because you never know. And then they freaking get you in 2 seconds, and you're like, huh, I knew it.
But point is, I am preoccupied with the notion of we need more courage in our society right now, and you know, not everyone is built that way anymore, man. It's not like when we were early humans and we had to every single day we had to conquer fear. Every single day. You're like, wow, that is a you know, a big old woolly mammoth right there. Okay, and I'm the guy leading the hunting pack, and I'm going to be the first spear throw, or I'm the one that's the distraction. I'm the diversion,
Yep.
or that's a like, you know, you hear some rustling in the bushes. And you're so attuned that
saber-toothed tiger.
You know the sound of a saber-toothed tiger. You know the smell too, and you're migrating with your women and children, you know, and you know that there's you and enough maybe like the 3 guys around you that are going to have to tackle that particular challenge, because you know as soon as you yell something's going to happen. You're going to leap out of the bushes or whatnot. I don't know. Like there's all these examples of when courage was fundamental to who we were as a species. And now it's a skill and a muscle that is just dying away. And some recent events are like just perfect examples of what that cowardice looks like. I would say recent events outside of Ukraine, because the Ukrainians right now talk about courage.
Yeah,
like those. Like I get choked up like reading stories about like, you know, the Ukrainian military, what they're doing right now, and the stuff that they're discovering as they retake these towns and these cities. You know, and the fact that they are literally fighting the David and Goliath battle right now.
Right.
But they're doing so in the face of annihilation. That is what they're doing. In the face of annihilation, they continue to stride forward. Eastern European guys, they're
the best fighters in the world.
Well, they are.
You know, like UFC, wrestling, things like that.
But why is that? Their people have been through so much shit. Trauma and warfare, starvation, and you know, surviving the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. Like they're so attuned and accustomed to grit and sacrifice.
Yep.
That, not to say that every man out there is a fucking, you know, is a some heroic, courageous guy, right? But it just so happens that part of the world over-indexes or producing those sorts of people.
Oh yeah.
You know. So anyway, that's what I've been preoccupied with, and I think the reason that it matters to me so much is that I see the way it affects the Black community. Frankly, like I think this is going to sound very racist. I should probably not even say it, but like I care most
until you
about.
say it where it doesn't sound racist.
Here's what I was going to say. I care the most about the Black community. Mm-hmm. Right, I care the most about that. Not because other communities don't matter, because like, you know, I think that Black people are better than anyone. Like, no, that is like those are the problems that impact me and my family,
and your future family,
and my future family the most. So I'm most in tune to that sort of neck of the woods right now, and I see cowardice within the Black community that is emboldening progressive ideals and ideology that is actually, I'll use the word toxic here, that is toxic and insidious to the Black community. It's cancerous. If you want to go and march down the street and say, you know, and all these white people are screaming defund the police, and you want to validate that point of view, right? You want to validate that and say like, oh yeah, definitely defund the police. Because I know my community, where I'm from, Baltimore, my community would turn into a war zone. It would turn into a drug dealer control. It would turn into some of these regions in South America we were talking about earlier.
Right.
It's like it would be.
There's always going to be something that's going to take over.
Exactly.
There's no order.
In that power vacuum. Like if anyone's watched The Wire, even though I hate to be from Baltimore mentioning The Wire because Baltimore people don't watch The Wire, but like it's a perfect example of like there are these powerful entities on every block. You know what I mean? These opportunists that are waiting for the right opportunity, or they're only held in check by the police.
Of the cops, yeah.
Right?
Just even the presence of them.
100%, right? So like if you ask someone from like the inner city in West Baltimore if they need more police protection in their communities, you're going to get a probably resounding hell yeah. And the only people that are going to be like, well, actually, I don't think that'd be a good idea, are probably the ones selling drugs because they're like, that's a little bit jeopardizing to like how I'm feeding my family.
Exactly.
But if you're the average person and you just want to, I want my kids to be able to walk to school and be safe.
Right.
And I want to be able to go outside, drive to work and come back and be safe. I don't want to have to worry about my kids getting struck by a stray bullet. I don't want to have to worry about my son getting shot because he got in a fight. I don't want to worry about any of that shit, right? I don't want to have to worry about my children thinking that the only way that they can survive and make it in the world is by selling drugs. If you care about that shit, hell, if you care about the fact that young black men are being killed at a rate that we have not seen in literally like
history,
30 years, right? And we're talking about like the cocaine 80s, right? Back when shit was bad. You know what I mean? We haven't seen this level of violence within the black community in that long. Look, it takes some courage to be the one that stands up and says, well, actually, that idea would be, I know it's popular. I hear you. I hear how you might think that may help, the 100 or so black men that are killed by the cops every year, right? Like, I know that may save them. But that police pullback, the demoralization of the police, the decriminalization of crimes that should be, punishable by 25 years in prison, etc. Like that's not good for the black community. In fact, like this lack of courage, the lack of courage in this current moment, I think is what is driving the decline and the death toll in the black community. It's it's definitely not good. I think that we need more courage to look these things that maybe are very uncomfortable, may make us other people unhappy, like dead in the face, and be like, look, that's that is what it is. As a product manager, we are not the way that we feel about a problem is fucking irrelevant. That's not the problem.
Right.
Like it's not the question is not how do you feel. The question is you quantify the problem.
Right.
And break it down into pieces.
This is where feelings can be detrimental, is in these kind of moments. And there's we need to look at the facts and the data and leave emotion out of it. There's a time and place for emotions. Yes, you're not saying to remove emotions from this. But it is such a topic that is so emotionally driven, to be able to even think logically behind it. It does take courage.
That's one way of putting it. I think that rational thought is what's necessary for us at least within the black community. When I say us, to get out of our current predicament, and to start to change the culture that we've created over time, which is quite toxic. You ask me. I think black culture is one of the things that people do not criticize nearly enough.
There's a great YouTuber I've been watching who talks a lot about the black community. I got to send you his link, and I'll link it in the podcast description, because his stuff has been very eye-opening, the way he views things. And I grew up in the black community, Coney Island, Brooklyn. All my friends were black growing up, so I understand when folks talk about it, not to the extent that I can, right? Because I didn't grow up with that culture, but I grew up very close to the culture. And his name is FD Signifier. I definitely want to get him on the podcast. So that's like a big thing. I think you should check him out. And like for folks, I just want to shout him out because he really digs into it. He makes like 2 hour long videos, so you got to be like patient with it. But he like goes through everything, does a shit ton of research, and really digs into like a lot of the facts and data. I think some things you may disagree with on what he talks about, but I'll kind of leave that to you.
Yeah. No, I'm always open to other perspectives. I think that's another thing that matters to me a lot. Just being able to take in multiple perspectives, even if I disagree with it. So it doesn't matter how I feel about it. How you feel about it is absolutely irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's about quantify the impact and quantify the problem, quantify it, and then make a decision based on that.
Exactly.
Don't. It's not like, oh well, I this morning I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and that makes me a little bit nervous, and that actually reminds me of my childhood trauma. So it's like
the book that I'm reading right now, something that I like that he said in the book is that we are using these terms too lightly. Oh, I didn't get my morning coffee, now I'm depressed. Or I didn't get, like, oh, this happened to me, now I'm gonna be traumatized. And he's like, you need to stop. Like, pretty much in the book, he's like, stop using these terms unless you go see a professional and they tell you like, oh, that's inherent trauma because you experienced this when that happened to you X amount of times, and now it's affecting you in these ways. And so it's like, don't use these terms so lightly. They're really serious for the people that are actually going through them, So I've been trying my best to like do, because it's just part of the culture now, right? It's in the memes now, like all this shit where you say like, I'm depressed because of this, like I didn't have my morning coffee, or I'm traumatized because this happened to me today,
Yeah, I feel like people overuse the word traumatized.
Oh yeah.
Too. They in reference, I don't disagree with that. Don't disagree with that notion. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said there was another thing you were pondering. I wanted to make sure you had a chance to.
So, what was that?
Talk about courage being number one, but you said there's a few.
Oh, well.
Maybe from all these books you're reading. Sorry, I'm looking at his little bookshelf he has here.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of ideas right now. I've been sort of mulling around. What I'm right on the edge of is attachment styles and how they influence relationships.
Yes.
And influence my own behavior. So it's still so new to me, but it's a lens by which to look at relationships that I just didn't realize was there or existed before. And I was like, holy crap. So I think attachment is definitely a big one for me right now.
Is with all your current relationships in general, because attachment is not only like for intimate relationships, it's for everything. So is it showing up in terms of like when you think about the relationships you have with the people in your life, are you starting to see like, oh, I'm anxious, I'm an anxious attachment when I'm in this situation, whether that's with a woman, a family member, a guy friend, right?
That's interesting.
Do those thoughts come up for you?
No, actually, I'm still I'm still looking at it through the context of like romantic relationships right now.
Got it.
There's a small army of bikers going on outside. That's
funny enough. We were talking about that before the podcast. How annoying that is.
Yeah, antisocial behavior. Yeah, but right now I'm mostly trying to understand it through the context of my romantic relationships and like why on earth do I like react the way that I react, or like if I get rejected and it's not for like a really obvious reason. I'm like, what was the thing that she felt that I may not even be aware of, right? Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of I think women's intuition is their most powerful. No, let me not say that. It's one of the most powerful sort of traits and attributes, and they can't necessarily. The average woman cannot break down a woman's intuition to you, but there's something that they just can detect some shit that we're like.
They just get it.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to mate choice, mating decisions, I think that they are hyper attuned to being able to make quote unquote good calls when mating.
Unless they're on birth control.
Well, no, even
You think so?
I think when it
There's
comes
so many studies behind it of women like they're consent is such a strong part of a relationship dynamic, and apparently when they get off birth control, that changes, and they may be the likelihood of them being unattractive to the partner they started dating while on birth control. It's actually a real thing, and I've experienced this with my ex. So
Wow.
like I know exactly that change between her being on birth control, us starting a date, and a year later, her doctor being on, you're on a really high dose of birth control. You need to come off of it. Like and like our relationship just changed dramatically from there. But
wild.
yeah, so apparently
Wow.
it's a thing. So like every time I meet a guy and I'm like, you started dating a girl, was she on birth control? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, just be ready when she gets off, just in case.
Not all women are like that, Ruben.
Okay.
Not all women are like that.
I'm not saying all
Don't
women.
project too hard.
I'm not-
However, I hear you. I hear you. It's very plausible. That
I need to
something
talk
like
to a
that-
woman about this.
No, but I've dated many women that transitioned birth control types or methods while we were dating, or they went off birth control after being on it, et cetera, et cetera. And like, gosh, the hormonal changes and things that they go through, the things that they talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Like the missed periods, the weird periods, the periods that won't end. Like there's a lot of that. Changes to their sex drive. So I will not pretend to understand, though. I will not pretend. I just know that it's complicated.
Yeah. I only know these things through like books that Karina reads on like female anatomy and like understanding, and she just like relays that info to me. Maybe I'll just talk about it on a podcast in the future, but it's very interesting when it comes to like understanding.
But yeah, when it comes to attachment styles, though, the romantic relationships that I have are like probably the easiest and clearest way of like sort of like doing that quote unquote analysis on myself, because some of these relationships are fairly new, or they're short, or you can you have like pretty clear data signals.
Oh, right.
Like especially early on. One of the things I believe very strongly is that who a person is when you meet them, literally the first time, before they've calibrated themselves to you and your dynamic, that is who they are fundamentally, right? And you're just seeing them in the raw form, and believe and trust everything that they show you in those first couple of interactions. So I think that's really strong data to draw conclusions from, is what I'm saying. So when it comes to attachment styles, looking at like some of the newer relationships that I've been in, and now being able to sort of have a more clear understanding of like, oh, she might have been an avoidant attachment, and I expressed maybe a little bit too much feeling for her early on, right? Or she's an anxious attachment, and I was a bit, I sort of picked up on her clinginess, and I got distant, right? And for some reason, then that may explain her behavior when X happened or Y happened. So, yeah, there's been a lot of that. So that's also been top of mind for me. I think it's the next frontier in my own personal journey, my own personal growth, because I am trying to find a baby mama. So,
that's gonna be a journey.
yeah. I say now, folks. When I say baby mama, what I really mean is a woman that I am in a monogamous, committed relationship with, that we decide it's time to have children, and
Live
we
together,
are committed.
get married, all that.
We are marriage is that's up to her, up to us. But it would be like a committed relationship for the duration of that child's upbringing, into the early 20s at a minimum. So that's what I mean, like baby mama. Yeah, we in for the long haul. So how do you find a woman that's actually like secure attached and able to do that? Because secure attached people smell anxious attachment like it's the odor of death. They're like, no, not interested. Right?
Yeah, I'm out.
Same with avoidance. Well, actually, I think secure attached people have probably the hardest time of avoidance, because we all want what we can't have. So trying to draw people in.
Yeah,
Nothing like an anxious attached person to push you the fuck away.
Oh.
So,
all right. So we have two things that you're pondering on that I think other people should ponder on. Is there any last minute thoughts?
Last minute thoughts.
You want to share?
Man, well, I think there's two things. One is how we come to the conclusion, how we think and how we develop ideas. It's something I'm very is very Jordan Peterson-esque, but I believe in it very, very strongly. And that's that we're all in the process of like the first time that we articulate something, it's typically like it's a mess. So I think giving people the time to actually like articulate it well. When I say articulate it well, like helping them articulate it, like as they form their thoughts. Like the first time they deliver the thought won't be very constructive, won't be very clean.
Right.
But then you should help them, even using like the Rogerian method, to like fix and construct that thought to be even more clear.
What's the Rogerian method?
The Rogerian method is when you explain back to the person what their thought is.
Tool.
Yeah. And you try to explain it back to their level of satisfaction. So like when they say, yeah, that's what I was saying, right? That's the Rogerian method. So I think that's really, really important, and something that is like a secret weapon in relationships. So when you're having a disagreement, like truly build the empathy and understanding. I was actually reading about this in How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah,
and
classic book.
Yeah, and it's a really powerful way to actually like improve your relationship, just letting people like be heard. So I think that's one thing. Last minute thought, and then the other last minute thought is on thinking in multiple dimensions. There's no problem. I was talking about product management, how there's trade-offs all the way down through a lot of these decisions that we make. There are multiple dimensions to every single problem, and if you think that you have the answer in whatever dimension that you're in, then you are not seeing the full picture. Mm-hmm. We're all staring at an elephant way too close to it. So, we just have to be very empathetic, I think, to perspectives that may not align with ours, but they're seeing another part of the picture that we're not seeing. And that means that their perspective, right, and that their perspective is valuable. Regardless of how much it makes you feel, whatever, it's irrelevant. They're giving you another angle to look at a problem through. I think that makes their perspectives valuable. Those are two things about life that I'm just like, those are two super hardcore.
Oh yeah. And I'll add to that. Like every time I find something, if it emotionally triggers me, I'm like, oh, this is emotionally triggering me. I'm going to look at the other side of this. So that's like the abortion stuff. I'm like, as uncomfortable it is, I need to understand why people are like, we shouldn't do that. And and come to my own conclusion of like why, instead of being like, those are bad people. They're too fucking religious or too Christian or whatever it may be. But I just used abortion as an example. But it's for anything, any idea that I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling emotional about this. Like, this is kind of making me angry. I'm going to look at the other side. It's just a thought when folks are, you already mentioned it, but like when folks are feeling that, and it's just like, find another. Like, people hate Ben Shapiro. Guess what? I listen to that motherfucker because he gives perspective. When I'm like, I know, like, from how I grew up and things, I agree with some perspective on the other side. And I'm like, well, I'm going to listen to this guy, even though I don't agree with him a lot of the time. I'm going to listen to him because he makes valid and great arguments and great opinions and makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, I know it's not popular, but I'm going to fucking do it anyway.
Yeah. Oh man, Shapiro, you choose a lightning rod. But yeah, he's I don't disagree with you at all, and I think it's a part of gaining a 4-dimensional perspective on a problem instead of let me not say 4-dimensional, a 3-dimensional perspective on a problem instead of a 2D one.
Right.
So especially when you feel like you haven't figured it out and you're like, oh, I know, I have an opinion and it's bulletproof. It's like, oh, do you know? Okay, yeah, sure. That means that you've stopped your exploration of the actual problem, and you're closing your mind. And to your point, that gives Ben Shapiro a listen every now and then too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because I'm like, especially when it's a hot button issue, I'm like, let's see what he has to say about it.
And sometimes I click those videos. And
I'm like, oh yeah, exactly. I do the same shit. I'm like, okay, all right, that was enough. That's enough. Okay, let me just get back to the real world now. But still, he's he's an interesting character.
Very interesting character. But anything that I didn't ask that you wanted me to ask before I shut this down.
No, I think I'm good. I'm happy to be on the podcast, bro. This is a dream come true. Shit. So thank you for having me and having this conversation. Oh man, you even got a mushroom sticker on your laptop. That's hardcore.
I try. Well, yeah, thank you for your time and coming.